The wind howled through the barren forest, its icy fingers reaching into every crevice of the earth. Snow blanketed the ground in an endless expanse of white, and the air crackled with the kind of cold that stung the lungs with every breath. Against this merciless backdrop, a German shepherd named Elsa trudged forward, her once proud gait now a painful shuffle. Her thick fur was matted with snow, and a deep gash on her flank seeped dark red against the pristine snow. Behind her, hidden in a shallow dugout beneath a fallen tree, were 4 tiny bundles of life. Her puppies. Elsa glanced back, her ears swiveling to catch the faint, pitiful cries of her young. She couldn't linger. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and she knew they wouldn't survive another day without food. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, she pushed forward into the blizzard, her breath misting in the frigid air. Her mind drifted as she moved, flashes of warmth and light invading the bleakness of her reality. There had been a time when Elsa's world wasn't filled with cold and hunger. She remembered a crackling fireplace, a child's laughter, and a gentle hand stroking her ears. A name had been spoken with love, Elsa, good girl. But those days were gone, replaced by an unforgiving winter and the cries of her helpless young. She didn't hear the growl until it was almost too late. Her head snapped up, and her body tensed despite the pain. Ahead, 2 glinting eyes peered out from the underbrush, low and predatory. A wolf. It stepped into the clearing, its sleek gray body blending seamlessly with the surrounding snow. Elsa's lip curled, a low growl rumbling from her chest as she squared herself against the threat. She was outmatched, and she knew it. But retreat wasn't an option. Her puppies were behind her. The wolf lunged, and Elsa dodged, yelping as her injured flank flared with pain. She snapped her jaws, her teeth finding the wolf's shoulder. It yelped and backed off, circling her warily. Elsa stood her ground, her breath ragged but her eyes blazing with determination. She couldn't afford to lose. Not here. Not now. The standoff ended abruptly as the wolf snarled one last time, before slinking back into the forest. Elsa waited, her ears pricked, until she was certain it wouldn't return. Only then did she turn and limp back toward the shelter. The fight had drained what little energy she had left, and the snow seemed deeper, heavier, with every step. When she reached the dugout, her puppies greeted her with soft whimpers. She collapsed beside them, her body curling protectively around their tiny forms. They squirmed closer, their small mouths searching for milk. Elsa licked each one, her touch gentle despite her exhaustion. Their warmth was the only comfort she had left. The night was long and unforgiving. The wind battered the trees, and the temperature plummeted further. Elsa didn't sleep. Her ears remained alert for any sound of approaching danger, and her body shielded her young from the cold as best it could. Her thoughts drifted again to the past, to the family she had loved and the home she had lost. There was no anger in her heart, only a deep, aching sadness. She had trusted them, and they had left her. Morning came slowly, the pale light of dawn casting an eerie glow over the frozen landscape. Elsa knew she couldn't stay here much longer. Her puppies needed food, and so did she if she was to continue protecting them. She rose unsteadily, her legs trembling beneath her weight. The puppies cried in protest as she moved away, but she nudged them back into the shelter with her nose, her low whine a promise to return. She ventured further from the den this time, her nose to the ground as she searched for anything edible. The snow muffled every sound, and the forest felt unnaturally still. Her stomach growled loudly, but she ignored it, her focus on survival. A flash of movement caught her eye, and she froze, her ears swiveling forward. A rabbit darted across the snow, its white fur blending almost perfectly with its surroundings. Elsa crouched low, her muscles coiling as she prepared to pounce. Her leap was powerful, but clumsy. The rabbit darted away, its agility unmatched. Elsa landed awkwardly, the impact jarring her injured flank. She let out a pained yelp, but forced herself back to her feet. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. The day wore on, and her search proved fruitless. Her strength waned, and the cold seeped deeper into her bones. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elsa turned back toward the den, empty-handed and defeated. Her puppy's cries reached her ears before she saw them, their tiny voices piercing the stillness of the night. She hurried to them, her heart breaking as she realized how weak they had become in her absence. Curling around them once more, Elsa closed her eyes and rested her head on the snow-covered ground. The fight for survival was far from over, but for now, she was there and they were safe. The darkness pressed in around them, but Elsa held on, her love for her puppies the only thing keeping her going. Somewhere in the distance, a faint light flickered. It was too far away for Elsa to notice, but it moved steadily closer, weaving through the trees. A solitary figure trudged through the snow, a flashlight cutting through the darkness. They paused, their breath visible in the cold night air, as they spotted the faint outlines of paw prints leading toward the den. The figure hesitated, their eyes scanning the woods before they followed the trail. The figure moved cautiously, their boots crunching through the snow. They had been hiking for hours, their original path diverted by the relentless storm. The faint tracks they followed now weren't part of their plan, but something about the pattern, the way the paw prints staggered, as if the animal were limping, compelled them forward. "Hello," the figure called out into the night. Their voice was muffled by the wind, swallowed almost instantly by the howling gusts. They tightened their grip on the flashlight, its beam dancing across the endless white expanse. The tracks led deeper into the forest, toward a cluster of fallen trees. Beneath one of the larger trunks, the figure froze. The flashlight revealed the source of the tracks, a German shepherd, curled tightly around 4 small puppies. The dog's eyes flicked open, and she raised her head weakly, her ears flattening as she growled low in warning. She was protective, but it was clear she was exhausted. Her body trembled, her breath shallow. The hiker crouched a few feet away, lowering the flashlight to avoid startling her further. "It's okay, girl. I'm not here to hurt you," they murmured, their voice soft and steady. They reached into their pack, pulling out a granola bar. Breaking it into smaller pieces, they tossed one toward Elsa. She sniffed it cautiously, her growl subsiding as hunger overrode suspicion. She swallowed the morsel quickly, her eyes never leaving the stranger. The puppies stirred, their tiny whimpers tugging at the hiker's heart. They couldn't leave them here. Not like this. The hiker sat down in the snow, keeping a cautious distance from Elsa and her puppies. The storm was intensifying, and the temperatures were dropping rapidly. The flashlight's beam flickered slightly, a reminder of how fragile their situation was. Elsa watched the stranger with wary eyes, her body forming a protective barrier between the puppies and this unknown presence. She had fought off predators before. This was no different, at least in her mind. But the small morsel of food had been a temporary truce, a glimmer of something Elsa hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The hiker adjusted their pack and looked around. "I need to get you and these little ones somewhere warm," they said softly, more to themselves than to Elsa. Reaching for a radio clipped to their belt, they hesitated. The signal in these parts was unreliable, and any delay could be dangerous. Time was working against them. For a moment, Elsa seemed to relax, lowering her head slightly. The hiker took it as an opportunity. They edged closer, moving slowly to avoid startling her. "You've done so much for them," the hiker murmured, their voice steady. "But you're not going to survive out here like this." Elsa's ears flicked, the words washing over her. The stranger's tone wasn't threatening. It was calm, almost soothing. She didn't trust easily anymore, but something about the way they moved made her pause. Her puppies whimpered softly, pressing closer against her, their tiny bodies shivering despite her warmth. The hiker made a decision. They slid their pack off their shoulders and unzipped it. From within, they pulled out a thermal blanket. They unfolded it, laying it carefully on the snow a short distance away. "It's for you and the pups," they said gently. "I'll step back." True to their word, the hiker moved a few feet away, sitting cross-legged in the snow and waiting. Elsa's eyes flicked between the blanket and the stranger, her instincts warring with her exhaustion. Finally, she inched forward, nudging the blanket with her nose. Satisfied, she began nudging her puppies onto it one by one, her movements deliberate but slow. The hiker exhaled a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "Good girl," they whispered, the words carrying genuine admiration. But as Elsa settled herself and her pups on the blanket, the reality of the situation loomed. Her breathing was labored, and her injured flank wasn't healing in these conditions. The hiker needed to act quickly. They couldn't carry Elsa and all 4 puppies alone, at least, not in this storm. "I'll be back," the hiker promised, rising to their feet. They pulled out a piece of fabric from their pack, tying it to a nearby branch to mark the spot. "I won't leave you here." Elsa didn't growl this time. She simply watched, her body a mixture of trust and skepticism, as the hiker turned and disappeared into the snow. The trek back to the base camp was brutal. The hiker, whose name was Adam, fought against the wind and snow, their determination fueled by the image of Elsa and her puppies. His radio crackled faintly, a weak signal finally breaking through. "Base, this is Adam," he said, breathless. "I found a dog in her litter. Injured. Need assistance for transport." "Over." There was a pause before a voice came through, distorted but clear enough to understand. "Copy that, Adam. ETA, 40 minutes. Hold tight." Back at the den, Elsa curled tighter around her puppies, her ears twitching at every sound. She didn't know if the stranger would return, but something in her gut told her to hold on just a little longer. Her puppies stirred against her, their tiny breaths a fragile symphony of life. Outside, the storm raged on. Minutes felt like hours. Then, faintly, she heard it, the crunch of boots against the snow. Elsa's ears perked up. The light from a flashlight broke through the darkness, accompanied by voices. More than one this time. Adam appeared first, his face etched with determination. Behind him, 2 others carried supplies and a large carrier. "Hey, girl," Adam said softly, kneeling down. "I told you I'd come back." Elsa's growl was faint, more reflex than aggression. Adam held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay. We're here to help." The team moved carefully, their actions deliberate and slow. One of them unfolded a second blanket, gently draping it over Elsa and her pups. Another prepared a makeshift stretcher. "Ready?" Adam asked, glancing at his team. "Ready," one of them replied. The moment they approached with the stretcher, Elsa tensed. Adam knelt beside her, speaking softly. "You're brave, Elsa. So brave. Let us help you now." It was the way he said her name, as if it had always belonged to her. Something in his voice broke through the wall she had built. Elsa let out a low whine, her body relaxing just enough for them to act. Carefully, they lifted Elsa and her puppies onto the stretcher, wrapping them in the thermal blankets. The storm showed no signs of relenting, but with Elsa and her family secured, they began the long trek back to safety. As they moved through the forest, Adam glanced down at the injured German shepherd. "You're going to make it," he whispered. "All of you." For the first time in weeks, Elsa closed her eyes, not out of exhaustion, but with the faintest flicker of hope. The storm didn't let up, its relentless fury testing the limits of both man and beast. Adam and his team trudged through the thick snow, the stretcher swaying slightly with each step. Elsa's breathing was shallow but steady, her puppies nestled tightly against her side. The warmth of the thermal blankets and the rhythm of Adam's reassuring voice kept her calm, though she was teetering on the edge of exhaustion. The group moved in near silence, their focus entirely on the mission. Adam led the way, his flashlight cutting through the swirling snow. He glanced back frequently, his eyes meeting Elsa's for brief moments. He wasn't sure if she understood his words, but he spoke anyway. A quiet monologue meant as much for himself as for her. "We're almost there," he murmured. "Just a little farther." The radio crackled again, a voice breaking through the static. "Adam, what's your location?" "ETA to base." Adam paused to respond, his voice strained. "We're on the ridge. 15 minutes out. The dog and her pups are stable, but barely." "Over." "Copy that. We'll have the med bay ready. Hang in there." The trail grew steeper as they approached the base camp, the incline adding strain to their already weary bodies. The storm showed no mercy, and the biting wind seemed to howl in protest against their progress. As they ascended, Elsa's ears flicked back, catching faint sounds beneath the roar of the storm, sounds that made her muscles tense despite her weakness. Wolves! Adam noticed her shift immediately. "What is it, girl?" he asked, his voice low. She let out a soft growl, her gaze fixed on the darkness behind them. The team halted, their flashlights scanning the area. And then they saw it, glowing eyes reflecting in the beam of the light, moving closer. "Wolves," one of Adam's teammates said grimly, tightening their grip on the stretcher. "We have to move," Adam urged. "Now!" The group picked up their pace, the stretcher swaying more violently with each step. Elsa's growl deepened, her protective instincts overriding her fatigue. The wolves were gaining ground, their low growls and snapping jaws echoing in the night. They were hungry, desperate, and willing to take risks. Adam made a split-second decision. "Get her to the base," he shouted to the others. "I'll hold them off." "Are you crazy?" one of them yelled back, but Adam was already unshouldering his pack and pulling out a flare gun. He fired into the air, the bright red light briefly illuminating the forest and startling the pack of wolves. They hesitated, their movements faltering. "Go!" Adam yelled again. The team didn't argue this time. They pressed forward, the base camp's lights faint but visible in the distance. Elsa's gaze lingered on Adam as he stood his ground, the flare's glow reflecting in her eyes. She let out a low whine, her body shifting as if she wanted to follow him, but she was too weak. Adam fired another flare, his shouts echoing in the snowy expanse. The wolves scattered briefly, but they regrouped, their hunger driving them forward. He grabbed a branch from the ground, waving it threateningly, his heart pounding. The team reached the base camp, rushing into the warmth of the med bay. Elsa and her puppies were placed on a padded table, where medics immediately began tending to her wounds. The puppies were examined, their tiny bodies shivering despite the warmth now surrounding them. "She's critical but stable," one of the medics said. "We'll do everything we can." But Elsa wasn't calm. Her eyes darted toward the door, her ears twitching as she listened for sounds of Adam's return. She let out a soft, anxious whine, her body restless despite her exhaustion. "He'll be back," one of the medics said gently, stroking her head. "He'll be okay." Outside, Adam continued to fend off the wolves, his body aching from the cold and exertion. The flare gun was empty, and his makeshift branch weapon was doing little to deter the pack. He knew he couldn't hold them off forever, but he also knew he couldn't lead them back to the base. Summoning his remaining strength, Adam threw the branch toward the trees, shouting loudly to draw the wolves away. They hesitated briefly, their focus divided. Then, with a final yell, Adam ran in the opposite direction, his figure disappearing into the blizzard. Back in the med bay, Elsa's breathing grew rapid, her body trembling as if she could sense what was happening. The medics worked tirelessly, stitching her wounds and warming her puppies, but her anxiety didn't subside. The bond she had formed with Adam in those fleeting hours was unshakable, and the weight of his absence pressed heavily on her. The storm finally began to ease, the winds dying down as dawn approached. The base camp was quiet, the medics resting after hours of work. Elsa lay on the table, her puppies nestled against her, their tiny breaths steady. And then the door creaked open. The base camp was bustling with activity as the team carried Elsa and her puppies into the med bay. The warmth inside was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Elsa squinted against the bright lights, her body trembling from exhaustion and stress. Her puppies let out weak cries, their tiny voices drowned by the flurry of motion around them. "She's critical," one of the medics said, examining the deep gash on Elsa's flank. "We need to clean this wound and get fluids in her immediately." Another medic carefully lifted the puppies onto a heated pad, wrapping them in soft blankets. "They're malnourished but alive," she said with relief. "If we act quickly, they'll pull through." Elsa let out a low whine, her gaze fixed on her puppies. The medics worked efficiently, speaking in hushed tones to avoid startling her. Adam's teammates hovered near the entrance, their faces pale and drawn from the ordeal. But Adam wasn't among them. "Where's Adam?" one of the medics asked, glancing toward the door. "He stayed behind," a teammate said, his voice tight with worry. "He wanted to lead the wolves away." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of those words sinking in. Elsa's ears flicked, her eyes darting toward the door as if she understood. Her body tensed, but she was too weak to move. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to subside. The wind had calmed, leaving a heavy stillness in its wake. Adam trudged through the snow, his body battered but unyielding. He had led the wolves far from the base camp, firing his last flare to scatter them before circling back. His flashlight flickered, the beam cutting through the pale dawn light. Every step felt heavier than the last, but the thought of Elsa and her puppies waiting at the base camp kept him going. When the camp's lights finally came into view, a wave of relief washed over him. The medics met him at the entrance, their faces lighting up with surprise and gratitude. "Adam, we didn't think," one started, but he waved them off. "Are they okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "They're stable," the medic replied. "But Elsa, she's been looking for you." Inside the med bay, Elsa lifted her head weakly as Adam entered. Her ears perked, and her tail thumped faintly against the table. The sight of him seemed to restore some of her strength. Adam approached slowly, kneeling beside her. "Hey, girl," he murmured, reaching out to stroke her head. "I told you I'd come back." Elsa leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. Her puppies, now warm and fed, let out soft squeaks from their blankets. Adam smiled, glancing between them and their mother. "You've got a strong family here," he said softly. The medics continued their work, cleaning Elsa's wounds and monitoring her puppies. Hours passed, and the tension in the room eased as the storm gave way to a clear, calm sky. Adam stayed by Elsa's side, his presence a steady comfort. Days turned into weeks, and Elsa's condition improved steadily. Her puppies grew stronger, their tiny bodies filling out as they thrived under the care of the medics and Adam. Elsa's trust in Adam deepened, her wary eyes softening each time he entered the room. But the question of Elsa's past lingered. One day, while brushing her coat, Adam noticed the faint imprint of a name and number on her old, worn collar. He called the number, hoping to piece together her story. The response was bittersweet. Elsa's family had been forced to leave her behind due to unforeseen circumstances. They had searched but assumed she hadn't survived the harsh winter. When Adam explained her ordeal, the family was overwhelmed with guilt and gratitude. "She's found a new family here," Adam said gently, glancing at the puppies playing nearby. "She's safe now." As spring approached, the snow began to melt, revealing the vibrant world beneath. Elsa and her puppies thrived in their new home, a testament to resilience and the power of second chances. Adam often sat with them in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. "Not every story has a perfect ending," he mused one day, scratching behind Elsa's ears. "But this feels close enough." Elsa let out a soft bark, her eyes reflecting the quiet contentment they had all fought so hard to achieve. The puppies bounded around her, their playful yips filling the air. And for the first time in a long while, the world felt warm again.